Days after the shocking incident at the river, Ada tried to focus on her daily chores, but her thoughts constantly drifted back to that fateful evening. She felt both regretful and confused, unsure of why Teo had acted so carelessly. Her mother noticed her distracted state and asked if something was wrong, but Ada couldn't bring herself to share the truth. Teo, on the other hand, avoided Ada entirely. His guilt over what had happened weighed heavily on him, but instead of apologizing, he chose to keep his distance. Ada grew more hurt by his silence, feeling abandoned when she needed answers the most. One day, while fetching water from the village well, Ada overheard a group of girls gossiping about Teo. "Did you hear? He's been seen with Ikoat lately," one of them whispered. Ada's heart sank. She had always suspected Teo might not be trustworthy, but hearing it confirmed stung deeply. Instead of confronting Teo, Ada decided to focus on herself. She spent more time helping her mother at the market and learning new skills like weaving mats. Though her heart still ached, she began to feel a sense of independence she hadn't known before. Meanwhile, rumors about the strange occurrences at the river began to spread. Villagers whispered about the river spirit that had saved Ada and Teo. Some claimed it was a warning, while others thought it was a blessing. The elders called for a meeting to discuss what should be done. At the meeting, the chief elder proposed holding a cleansing ceremony at the river. "We must ensure our relationship with the spirits remains peaceful," he said. Ada listened quietly from the crowd, her heart racing. She wondered if returning to the river would bring back painful memories or help her find closure. The night of the ceremony arrived, and the entire village gathered at the riverbank. The air was filled with the scent of burning incense, and the elders chanted prayers to appease the spirits. Ada stood at the back, watching nervously as the flames from the ceremonial torches flickered in the dark. Suddenly, the wind picked up, and the water seemed to shimmer unnaturally. The villagers gasped, some taking it as a sign of the spirit's presence. Ada couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, but she stayed silent, unsure of what it all meant. After the ceremony, life in the village seemed to return to normal. However, Ada couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that her life was far from ordinary. She began having vivid dreams of the river, each one more intense than the last. In one dream, the river spirit spoke to her. "You have been chosen," it said. "But for what purpose?" Ada asked, waking up before she could get an answer. Unable to dismiss the dreams, Ada confided in her grandmother, who was known for her wisdom. Her grandmother listened carefully and then told her, "The river has chosen you for a reason, my child. You must be brave and find out why." Ada decided to visit the river during the day, hoping to understand her dreams. She stood at the edge, staring at the calm water, and whispered, "Why me?" Suddenly, the water rippled, and a voice seemed to echo in her mind. "You will understand in time." Feeling both frightened and intrigued, Ada promised herself she would be patient. She returned home and threw herself into her daily tasks, trying not to think too much about what the future might hold. However, she couldn't help but wonder if she was destined for something greater. Would you like me to continue from here? Each chapter will build on Ada's journey of self-discovery, the growing mystery of the river spirit, and her path to finding her purpose. As days turned into weeks, Ada began to notice small but strange changes in her life. Whenever she was near water, whether fetching it from the well or washing clothes by the stream, she felt a strange connection, as if the water itself recognized her. The villagers, too, seemed to treat her differently. Some whispered behind her back, calling her the girl of the river, while others avoided her altogether. Teo finally approached her one afternoon at the market. "Ada, I'm sorry for everything," he said, his voice filled with regret. Ada looked at him, unsure of what to say. Though she wanted to forgive him, she couldn't shake the feeling that their friendship would never be the same. "It's okay," she replied softly, before walking away. That evening, Ada sat outside her grandmother's hut, gazing at the stars. "Grandma, do you think I'm cursed?" she asked quietly. Her grandmother shook her head. "No, child. The river has given you a gift, not a curse. But it's up to you to figure out how to use it." Ada didn't feel gifted. She felt burdened by the strange events and the villagers' stares. Still, her grandmother's words gave her a glimmer of hope. She decided to visit the river again, this time with a clear mind and a strong heart, ready to face whatever awaited her. When Ada reached the river, she knelt by the water's edge and closed her eyes. "If you're listening," she said, "please show me what I'm supposed to do." For a moment, there was silence. Then the water began to ripple, forming shapes that looked like animals and symbols. Ada watched in awe as the shapes moved and changed. She saw images of a thriving village, children playing, and crops growing abundantly. But then, the vision darkened, showing the same village in ruin, with people crying and fleeing. "You must protect them," a voice whispered, fading as quickly as it came. The vision left Ada shaken. She ran back to her grandmother, who listened intently as Ada described what she had seen. "The spirits are warning us," her grandmother said. "Something bad is coming, and they believe you can stop it." Ada felt overwhelmed. She was just a 15-year-old girl. How could she protect an entire village? But her grandmother placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are stronger than you think, Ada. And you're not alone. The spirits chose you for a reason." The next day, Ada tried to share her vision with the village elders. But they dismissed her, calling her a child with an overactive imagination. "The spirits don't talk to children," one elder scoffed. Ada felt humiliated but refused to give up. She decided to seek help elsewhere. Remembering an old woman who lived on the outskirts of the village, known for her knowledge of the supernatural, Ada set out to find her. The journey was long and tiring, but Ada felt a sense of determination she had never felt before. When Ada reached the old woman's hut, she hesitated before knocking on the door. The woman, with sharp eyes and a weathered face, opened it and studied Ada carefully. "I know why you're here," she said before Ada could speak. "The river has spoken to you, hasn't it?" Ada nodded, surprised by the woman's knowledge. She explained her vision, and the woman listened carefully. "The spirits don't choose lightly," the old woman said. "You must prepare yourself for what's to come. The safety of your village depends on you." The old woman began teaching Ada about the ways of the spirits, showing her how to read signs in nature and how to interpret her dreams. Ada soaked up the knowledge like a sponge, realizing that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. But the training was not without its challenges. Ada often felt tired and frustrated, doubting her ability to succeed. "Courage is not the absence of fear," the old woman reminded her. "It's doing what must be done despite it." As Ada's training progressed, strange things began happening in the village. Livestock went missing, crops started wilting, and people reported hearing eerie sounds at night. The elders, who had dismissed Ada before, now looked to her for answers. "I told you this would happen," Ada said, standing before the council of elders. "The spirits warned me, but you didn't listen." Though she felt nervous, Ada spoke with confidence. She knew it was time to take action to save her village. The elders reluctantly agreed to let Ada lead a group to investigate the strange occurrences. Armed with her training and determination, Ada gathered a small group of villagers, including her grandmother, Teo, and a few brave young men. Together, they headed toward the forest, where many believed the trouble had begun. As they walked deeper into the woods, an eerie silence enveloped them. The birds stopped chirping, and the wind seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, they came across a clearing where the ground was blackened, as if burned by fire. "This is a sign," Ada whispered. "The spirits are trying to tell us something." That night, the group set up camp near the clearing. Ada stayed awake, keeping watch as the others slept. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but she also felt a sense of purpose. She was no longer just a scared girl. She was a leader now. As the moon rose high in the sky, Ada noticed movement in the shadows. A figure emerged, cloaked in darkness. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite her fear. The figure stepped closer, revealing itself to be an old man with piercing eyes. "You've come far, child," he said, "but your journey is just beginning." The old man introduced himself as Okoro, a guardian of the forest who had lived in harmony with the spirits for decades. He explained that the recent disturbances were caused by a dark force that had invaded the land. "It feeds on fear and discord," Okoro said. "If it's not stopped, it will destroy everything." Ada listened intently, her heart racing. "How do we stop it?" she asked. Okoro looked at her solemnly. "You must find the source of its power and destroy it. But beware, it will test your strength and your spirit." The group continued their journey the next morning, guided by Okoro. They followed a narrow path that wound through the forest, leading them to a hidden cave. "This is where the dark force resides," Okoro said. "But only Ada can enter. The rest of you must wait here." Ada felt a surge of fear, but also a deep sense of determination. She stepped into the cave, clutching the small talisman Okoro had given her. The air inside was thick and heavy, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. Inside the cave, Ada encountered strange and terrifying sights. Shadows danced on the walls, forming shapes of creatures that snarled and hissed at her. But she remembered Okoro's words. It feeds on fear. Taking a deep breath, she pushed forward, refusing to let the shadows intimidate her. At the center of the cave, Ada found a large stone altar. On it sat a glowing orb that seemed to radiate darkness. She reached for the talisman around her neck, feeling its warmth give her strength. "This must be the source," she thought. As Ada approached the altar, the orb began to hum, and a deep voice echoed through the cave. "Who dares disturb me?" it boomed. Ada's hands trembled, but she stood her ground. "I'm here to stop you," she said, her voice firm. "You've caused enough harm." The voice laughed, and the orb's glow intensified. Shadows swirled around Ada, trying to pull her back. But she held up the talisman, which emitted a bright light that pushed the darkness away. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, stepping closer to the orb. The orb's voice grew angrier, and the shadows became more aggressive. But Ada remembered her training and focused all her energy on the talisman. "You have no power here," she shouted, raising the talisman high. The light from the talisman engulfed the cave, and the shadows screamed as they dissolved into nothingness. The orb cracked, and a wave of energy burst forth, knocking Ada to the ground. When she opened her eyes, the cave was silent and still. The orb was gone, and the oppressive energy had vanished. She had done it. Ada emerged from the cave, battered but victorious. The group waiting outside rushed to her, cheering and embracing her. "You've saved us," Okoro said, his eyes filled with pride. Ada smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had ever known. When they returned to the village, the elders held a feast in Ada's honor. The villagers, who once doubted her, now treated her as a hero. Ada felt humbled by their gratitude, but knew her journey was far from over. The spirits had chosen her for a reason, and she was determined to continue honoring their trust. As the celebration died down, Ada felt a strange unease. Even though the dark force in the cave had been destroyed, she couldn't shake the feeling that her mission wasn't over. That night, as she lay in bed, a dream came to her. She saw the river, its waters dark and turbulent, and heard a voice whisper, "The battle has just begun." The next morning, Ada sought out Okoro. She told him about her dream, and he nodded gravely. "The darkness you defeated was just one fragment of a greater evil," he said. "There are others, hidden across the land. If they're not dealt with, their power will grow and consume everything. Ada knew she couldn't face this new challenge alone. She gathered a group of trusted villagers, including Tayo and her grandmother, and explained the situation. "We have to act quickly," she said. "If we wait, it might be too late." The group prepared for the journey, packing supplies and weapons crafted by the village blacksmith. Before they left, Okoro gave Ada a new talisman, more powerful than the first. "This will guide you," he said. "But remember, your greatest strength lies within." Their first destination was a distant mountain, said to be home to another fragment of the Dark Force. The journey was long and grueling, with the group facing harsh weather and treacherous terrain. Ada's leadership was tested as she worked to keep everyone motivated and safe. One night, as they camped near a rocky outcrop, they heard strange noises in the distance. It sounded like whispers, carried on the wind. "Stay together," Ada warned, clutching her talisman. But when she turned around, one of the villagers was missing. The group searched desperately for their missing companion, calling out his name into the darkness. Finally, they found him near the edge of a cliff, his eyes glazed over as if in a trance. "What happened?" Ada asked, shaking him gently. He blinked and seemed to snap out of it. "I heard a voice," he said, trembling. "It told me to follow it, but I don't know where it wanted me to go." Ada realized the darkness was already trying to manipulate them. "We need to be more careful," she said, her resolve hardening. The next day, they reached the base of the mountain. The air felt heavy, and the landscape was eerily quiet. As they climbed, they noticed strange symbols carved into the rocks, glowing faintly in the dim light. "These markings are a warning," Tayo said, his voice low. "We're getting close." At the top, they found a cave similar to the one Ada had entered before. But this time, the entrance was guarded by a massive stone statue. As they approached, the statue's eyes glowed red, and it began to move. The stone guardian swung its massive arms, forcing the group to scatter. Ada realized they couldn't defeat it with brute force. "It's protecting something," she thought. "If we can distract it, maybe I can find a way inside." While the others kept the guardian occupied, Ada searched the area and found a small, hidden passageway. She slipped inside, her heart pounding. The narrow tunnel led to another chamber, where a glowing crystal pulsed with dark energy. As Ada approached the crystal, she felt a wave of fear wash over her. The air seemed to thrum with malice, and she could hear whispers in her mind, urging her to turn back. But she held onto her talisman and pressed forward. When she reached the crystal, she placed the talisman against it. The light from the talisman grew brighter, and the whispers turned into screams. The crystal cracked and shattered, releasing a burst of energy that shook the mountain. The stone guardian outside collapsed as the dark force within the crystal was destroyed. The group hurried to Ada, relieved to see her safe. "You did it again," Tayo said, smiling. Ada nodded, but she knew this was only the beginning. As they made their way back down the mountain, Okoro appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. "You've done well," he said. "But the journey ahead will be even more dangerous. Are you ready?" Ada took a deep breath. "I am," she said. Ada and her group returned to the village to prepare for their next mission. The people celebrated their bravery, but Ada couldn't enjoy the festivities. She knew that the fragments of darkness would only grow stronger with time. That night, Okoro revealed the next location, a dense forest known as the Whispering Woods. "The woods are cursed," Okoro explained. "Many who enter are never seen again. The fragment there feeds on fear and confusion." Ada listened intently. "Then we'll face it together," she said, her voice steady. The group agreed, though unease flickered in their eyes. The journey to the Whispering Woods was filled with tension. The group passed through villages where people spoke in hushed tones about the strange occurrences in the forest. "They say the trees can talk," one villager whispered, "and the shadows have eyes." As they entered the woods, the air grew colder, and the light seemed to dim. The trees stood tall and twisted, their branches forming eerie shapes. Every step was accompanied by faint whispers, as if the forest itself was alive. The group stayed close together, their eyes darting at every shadow. Ada held her talisman tightly, its soft glow offering a small sense of comfort. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, forming words. "Turn back," they said, in voices that sounded both human and not. Ada ignored the voices, urging the group to press on. But then, a scream pierced the air. One of the villagers had vanished, leaving only his belongings behind. "It's trying to separate us," Ada realized. "We can't let it." They found the missing villager deeper in the woods, standing in a trance-like state. Ada called out to him, but he didn't respond. She held the talisman close to his chest, and the glow seemed to break whatever spell held him. "Thank you," he whispered, trembling. The group moved quickly, knowing they couldn't afford any more delays. Eventually, they reached a clearing where a massive tree stood, its roots twisting unnaturally. Ada could feel the dark energy radiating from it. "This is it," she said. As they approached the tree, its bark seemed to ripple, and a face appeared on its trunk. "Why have you come?" it boomed, its voice shaking the ground. Ada stepped forward, her heart racing. "We've come to end the darkness," she said. The tree laughed, a deep, menacing sound. "You think you can defeat me?" it said. Its roots began to move, wrapping around the group and pulling them toward its base. Ada struggled, her talisman glowing brighter with each passing moment. Ada focused all her energy on the talisman, hoping it would be enough. The light grew so intense that the roots recoiled, releasing the group. The tree roared in anger, its face contorting in rage. "You cannot destroy me," it shouted. But Ada wasn't deterred. She placed the talisman against the tree, and the light spread across its surface. The whispers turned into screams as the tree began to wither and crack. Finally, it collapsed into a pile of ash, and the forest grew silent. The group emerged from the whispering woods, exhausted but triumphant. The villagers who had feared the forest for generations cheered as Ada and her companions returned. "You've freed us from the curse," an elder said, tears in his eyes. Ada felt a sense of pride, but also a growing weight. She knew the darkness wasn't gone, it had simply retreated. That night, she dreamed of a vast desert and a voice that said, "The final battle awaits." Okoro confirmed Ada's dream the next morning. "The desert is where the last fragment lies," he said. "But it will be the most dangerous journey yet. The darkness there is ancient and powerful." Ada nodded. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." The group prepared for the harsh conditions of the desert, gathering water and supplies. They knew the journey would test them in ways they couldn't imagine, but they were determined to see it through. The desert was a vast expanse of sand and heat, with no shade or signs of life. The group trudged forward, their spirits tested by the relentless sun. Ada's talisman seemed to dim, as if the darkness ahead was draining its power. One night, as they camped under the stars, they heard a low rumble. At first, they thought it was the wind, but then they saw shadows moving across the dunes. "Something's coming," Teo said, his voice tense. The shadows took shape, revealing creatures made of sand and darkness. They moved quickly, surrounding the group. Ada held up her talisman, but its light was weak. "We have to fight," she shouted, grabbing a weapon. The battle was fierce, with the creatures attacking relentlessly. Ada realized they were drawn to fear, and she focused on staying calm. With each swing of her weapon, the creatures dissolved, until only silence remained. The group continued their journey through the desert, each step feeling heavier than the last. Ada felt the weight of her responsibility growing with every passing day. The talisman, once a brilliant beacon, now glowed faintly, as if it were struggling to keep up. At dusk, they stumbled upon the ruins of an ancient village buried in the sand. The remnants of walls and broken pottery whispered stories of a time long forgotten. As they explored, they found markings on the stones that resembled the symbols on Ada's talisman. In the center of the ruins stood a large stone tablet with inscriptions carved deep into its surface. Ada felt a strange pull toward it, her talisman glowing slightly brighter as she approached. "This must be a clue," she said, tracing the symbols with her fingers. As she touched the tablet, a low hum filled the air. The ground beneath them began to shake, and a hidden chamber opened up before them. The group hesitated, but Ada stepped forward. "This is the way," she said with certainty, and they followed her into the darkness. The chamber was vast, its walls covered in glowing symbols. In the center stood a pedestal holding a black crystal that pulsed with dark energy. Ada felt a chill run through her as she realized this was a fragment of the darkness they sought to destroy. Before she could act, the crystal began to emit a deep, resonating voice. "You've come far, but your journey ends here," it said. Shadows emerged from the walls, forming humanoid figures with glowing red eyes. The group prepared for battle. The shadowy figures attacked with speed and precision, forcing the group to scatter. Ada focused on the crystal, knowing it was the source of their power. She held the talisman high, its faint glow intensifying as she channeled all her energy into it. The light from the talisman struck the crystal, causing it to crack. The shadows screamed in unison, their forms dissolving into nothingness. But the crystal didn't shatter completely. Instead, it pulsed violently, sending a shockwave that knocked everyone to the ground. Ada struggled to her feet, her body aching from the shockwave. The crystal hovered above the pedestal, its cracks glowing with a fiery light. "It's not over," Okora warned. "The darkness is fighting back." Summoning every ounce of her strength, Ada gripped the talisman and stepped toward the crystal. She placed the talisman directly against its surface, and the two energies collided in a blinding explosion of light and shadow. The chamber shook violently as the crystal finally shattered into pieces. The group emerged from the ruins, battered but victorious. The sky above them seemed brighter, and the oppressive weight of the desert lifted. Ada felt a sense of relief, but also a lingering unease. "This was only part of the darkness," she said. "There's still more out there." Okoro nodded. "The final fragment lies in the heart of the desert," he said. "It's the source of all this chaos. If we destroy it, we can bring balance back to the world." The group steeled themselves for the final leg of their journey. As they ventured deeper into the desert, the environment grew more hostile. The sand burned their feet, and the air was thick with tension. Ada's dreams became more vivid, filled with visions of a towering black monolith surrounded by swirling shadows. One morning, they stumbled upon a lone traveler, an old man with a staff. "You seek the monolith," he said, as if he'd been expecting them. "It is a place of great power, but also great danger. Many have tried to destroy it, but none have returned." The old man offered them guidance, drawing a map in the sand. "Follow this path, but beware," he warned. "The monolith will test you. It knows your fears and will use them against you." Ada thanked him, though his words weighed heavily on her mind. As they continued, the landscape began to change. The sand turned black, and the air grew colder. They could see the monolith in the distance, a towering structure that seemed to absorb all light. It felt as if the darkness was watching them. When they reached the base of the monolith, they found themselves surrounded by an unnatural silence. The air was thick with dread, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Ada held the talisman tightly, its glow flickering like a dying flame. A voice boomed from the monolith, deep and menacing. "You have come far, but you will not succeed," it said. The ground beneath them split open, and creatures of pure darkness emerged, their forms twisting and shifting. The final battle had begun. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. The creatures attacked with a fury unlike anything they had faced before. Ada's companions fought bravely, but the darkness seemed endless. Ada realized that the talisman alone wouldn't be enough. She needed to draw on her inner strength. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ada stepped forward and pressed the talisman against the monolith. The light from the talisman grew brighter and brighter, engulfing everything in its glow. The monolith let out a final, ear-piercing scream before shattering into dust. The desert fell silent, and the darkness was no more.